Korea or America? Which side did we choose?
대한민국!
We're going to talk about something really fun today that I haven't really seen on YouTube. Maybe it's out there, maybe people have talked about it, but it's a thing where people who are typically between two cultures, in other words, they're mixed race, biracial, and one side is, say, for example, like us, represents America, the other side represents Korea. Who do you go for when those two countries are either going against each other or they're in, say, like the Olympics, which is actually starting, I guess, officially tonight. So that's why we thought it'd be fitting to talk about this. Which country do we want to actually take the most gold? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because usually what I find is that whenever like there's a situation where you have to choose a side, that most of my friends usually choose the Korean side, my half Korean friends. So I just, I thought we could talk about it because I'm curious which side you would choose. Yeah.
I'm scanning through my brain because I'm not a big sports watcher. I like to watch it, but I don't really get much things. Yeah. There are some that I enjoy, like ice skating and gymnastics, for example. But the thing I realized when we were discussing, okay, the Olympics specifically, I think back of all the Olympians that I've ever either appreciated or I had to watch them or like remember in my mind, like, wow, this was really amazing. And most of them come down to Korean players that I remember the most. Like, of course, Kim Yeona. Watching her ice skate was like nothing else. You know, I don't remember any other ice skater. It was like, wow, Kim Yeona, right? And then we had who was that swimmer? Do you remember the Korean swimmer?
Korean swimmer?
Yeah,
No.
a couple years back. Oh my gosh, we watched only him. Like everyone was about Michael Phelps. But
So
we were
this
always
is during
watching.
the Olympics? Summer Olympics?
Yeah, I can't remember his name, unfortunately. This is how bad I am
very
with sports.
impactful.
I know. But like we always watched him swim. And then archery, golf, always Korean players.
Right. What about the Winter Olympics? There was, I don't know what that sport is
Yeah,
called.
the brushing one.
It's the ice, right?
Yes,
Or
and
on
that
ice.
one too. I only watch the Korean sports
Right.
teams.
I think they did really well.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's like these very specific ones. I was like, oh, yeah, come to think of it, it was always Korean. And then the only time I ever watched a World Cup was I don't remember what it was. But I just remember I watched that in a bar here in Korea and everyone was cheering like crazy and we were just so happy when whoever the team was won.
Right. So I guess it's safe to say that you're Team Korea, right?
But I've never actively thought of myself as Team Korea.
Okay.
Yeah.
Got you.
I guess I'm not enough in those situations where I'm forced to pick a side.
Yeah.
Because most people know I don't know anything when it comes to sports.
So I guess it's safe to say for all you guys that are watching or listening that Becky and I are both we don't watch sports, we don't keep up with it. We're the ones that whenever there's like the big championship game, that's when we'll probably tune in, if that. But you know, we just sort of want to wait to get the end result. But actually tonight we're gonna watch the opening ceremony.
We are,
right?
Of the Olympics.
Of the Olympics.
Because the time is good. In
Yeah.
Tokyo, it's the same for us, time zone.
Yeah, but I'm more interested in that than the actual like games and events. Oh, gymnastics too.
Of course,
Interested in that.
gymnastics.
But so I guess for me, like growing up, what I remember is because again, I grew up around a lot of people who are half Korean because I grew up around a military base and there was just a decent sized Korean population where we were. And what I remember is, especially in 2002, do you know what 2002 was?
The FIFA World Cup.
Yes, the World Cup. Like that's a perfect example of all of my friends who are half Korean.
Everyone was
we were
into that.
all Team Korea.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, obviously they weren't playing America at the time, but we were just very proud. Like we had the shirts and everything, the red shirts.
Yeah.
It was just one of those things where we were just so proud of representing Korea. Even though we were in America, we grew up in America, and we know American culture better just by the fact that we're here or living in America at the time. So yeah, so I would say for me and my friends growing up, we were Team Korea as well. And it wasn't that we didn't like America or we weren't cheering for America. But I think it was just, we felt like we had two sides to represent, but the first choice would be Korea. And I'm wondering why that is. I have my speculations.
Do you think it's because in sports people like to see the underdog?
Yeah, I think so.
They like to cheer on the underdog, and then
so.
having at least one foot in the door, you're just like, yeah, I cheer for Korea, because it's not like Korea always dominated. Most people, I think, when it comes, especially like football, for example, soccer, or sports outside of ice skating and golf and archery, you wouldn't first come to mind as like Korea's a powerful team to play. So I think people like to have that, like, fighting for the underdog feeling sometimes, right?
Yeah, I agree. I think that's what it is. I mean, I think that's a big part to play, at least for me, because I like to root for the underdog no matter who it is. I used to be the kid that would just like whoever like my friends liked, I would just like that team. And usually they were like the dominating team, like whether it's the NBA or whatever, or NFL. But I've grown to love the underdogs because I like the process and the journey of being at the bottom and climbing your way to the top because you're so hungry and you really want to be successful. So I've grown to appreciate that. So I think that has become another reason why I choose to go for, say, Korea over America in certain contexts.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I also think the Olympics is a perfect example of this. It's funny how we're always, when it comes to sports, like the Olympics or World Cup, people are preaching good sportsmanship, and everybody has the equal right to play. And yet in this grand talk of like sportsmanship and equality and humanity, people are so fervently nationalistic for that short 2 weeks where these sports are going on.
Yeah.
And so it's like, you pick a side, which one do you belong to? And you're kind of forced to be like, oh, I fight for these guys, right? It's a very odd place to be in and to consider that, right? So did you watch Olympics at home with your family?
I mean, yeah, I did. I mean, we didn't like gather around the couch and watch it, but it was always on the TV growing up whenever the Olympics would come around, because it was every 4 years in the summer, and then was it every 2 years for Winter Olympics, or every 4 years? Just, I don't know. But yeah, we would always watch it. It would be there, but we wouldn't like make it a family affair or anything like that. So yeah, we always had it on, and we were always just sort of aware. And I think at the time it was just like, if Korea wasn't really like even involved, then yeah, we're like, go America.
Oh, really?
And of course, my dad's he's more on American side, so he's gonna root for America.
Oh, funny.
Yeah.
We didn't really watch the Olympics together as a whole. We would only have very specific things we wanted to see. Like, we would always watch ice skating and gymnastics, for example. And then my mom, when she caught track of certain players, like I just thought of him, the swimmer Park Tae-hwan, when, there's this Korean swimmer, you have to watch him. Oh, Korean golfer, you have to watch him. And then we would tune in to watch those ones. But honestly, I don't remember ever us as a family as a whole being like, this is a team we root for, or...
Right.
Yeah, it was never like that.
Yeah.
But when you're hanging out with the friends, I noticed that becomes a bit more defined, what it was. I remember one time I ever watched, I think it was the Olympics, with a couple of friends, and Korea was playing, and everyone was like, oh, there's Becky's team. Right. But I never indicated any like interest in rooting for anyone. I'm pretty sure I was just reading on the couch.
Yeah, it's easy, I guess, for like your friends to make assumptions because you are half of whatever side is playing, right? So I mean, that's a good point. So obviously the underdog thing, I think, is very it's sort of obvious. It's an obvious reason that a lot of people would go for that side of them. But I think another thing is, I don't know, this might go a little bit deeper.
Okay.
Is that it gives you, especially like if you grow up in America, like in our context, and you never really grew up in Korea, but you're half Korean, it sort of is another way for you to feel more of an affinity and more closer to the culture. So I think that's more deeper and more nuanced. And this is something where this is an interesting conversation because I just remember just throughout the, my time on YouTube and just sort of seeing just different Black Korean people across like the world through different like Facebook groups or even in the comment section. What I've noticed, and there's I actually do the same thing. Like a lot of people sort of have this like nationalistic pride for Korea, even though they didn't grow up in Korea. Maybe they were born in Korea, but they, grew up in the States. And I think it's just a way to just have that connection to your culture that you maybe didn't have the privilege or the chance to actually grow up and experience.
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm going to jump onto, because I have noticed a lot of times mixed Koreans who are growing outside of Korea, who have not grown in the mainstream of Korean culture, are, in a way, it is a displacement, right? Because it's a lack of connection through culture or social understandings that growing up in Korea or in a tight-knit Korean community, if you haven't, then you will miss out on that. And I think you will be aware. And so this is, I feel like, overcompensated in some areas where it's like, I have to prove I'm Korean, whether you're actively thinking that or not. And so how do you actively prove you're Korean? Well, then you listen to all the K-pop music, all the K-pop idols, right? Because that's Korean, right? Or, to actively prove when there was anti-Asian hate happening in the U.S. Suddenly you're an extremely vocal advocate for, Korean American and Asian rights, even though prior to that you didn't know anything about Korean's history or don't even speak the Korean language or anything like that. But in a way, it's a way for you to kind of prove like, I belong with this culture, I belong with these people. And the Olympics or sporting events are the perfect time where you don't have to look deep into those cultural nuances. You don't have to look into the lack of understanding of a certain culture or people group. It's just easy to be part of the crowd, part of the wave, the nationalistic pride. And you have a right to be part of that because you're also Korean, without having to actually deep delve into the realization, like, am I Korean or not?
That's a very good point. And that gets kind of deep, actually. But I do the same thing. I did the same thing growing up, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think that that just shows just the need of wanting to be part of your community.
Yes.
And so I don't think there's anything wrong with that. It's just very interesting how that happens. And even the same thing can be said of like people who may not be quote unquote mixed race or biracial, but they might be, say for example, like they're Jamaican Americans. And they might want to go for Jamaica, even though they were born in America. Maybe their parents were born in Jamaica, but they would go for the Jamaican team, And so I think it's sort of the same thing because you're proud.
It's a Jamaican bobsled team.
And here's the thing, right? Yeah, I'm remembering that movie.
Cool Runnings.
Yeah, throwback. But I don't know. I think another thing is, and I don't want people to take this the wrong way, but it's like, America is America, right? Like it's already in many ways a world leader in many aspects, or has that respect globally, kind of, depending.
We're not going to get into that.
Right. But generally speaking, right, it sort of has been that way for the longest time. And again, it goes back to the underdog conversation where it's like, okay, like, you have the all-star kid that wins everything, or like the super smart kid that's always raising their hand and, in class and knows the answer to everything. Kid. And it's like, you have other students in there that are capable. Maybe they're not as fast, or maybe like the answer comes a little later. Like I was that kid. You were probably the kid that was like,
the first one. Yeah. I hate that kid.
Yeah. But it's like, you want to see other people or other countries or other cultures have an opportunity. And I like the fact that there could be more representation than just America. Don't get me wrong. I'm still proud to represent
These
America.
These are not anti-American sentiments.
Exactly. But for me, I'm always going to go for, I think, Korea in most contexts. Unless it's like the NBA or something, or like basketball.
Why?
Right? I don't
Why?
know. I just I'm a rep America.
I see.
But yeah, so I think generally that's sort of what I've noticed in a lot of people who are either mixed race or, multicultural or cross-cultural, whatever the case is.
It gets sticky when it turns into, because here this is where the lines of race and national belonging become a bit more black and white. Sometimes very literally. When you think about some sports teams, for example, let's say in the UK, where their players are black, and then they miss a shot. This happened recently. And all suddenly, they're UK. They're part of a UK team. All their fans are booing them, saying racist things. How could you do that? Is that not your own team?
Right.
But the line suddenly is like, oh, but race and nationality suddenly becomes almost a little bit more clear, if that's the way that you want to put it, or point it out, or hyper evaluated. And this becomes even more clear when you see mixed race players who are choosing to represent one country over the other. And when people look at them with their eyes and say, hang on, but you're Haitian. You shouldn't be playing for Japan.
Right.
Hang on, you're this. You shouldn't be playing for that country because those countries look like this and you don't look like that. And so this is, again, that race and nationality line. Everyone's staring at it very, very much.
Right. Yeah, I think people need to just lighten up. You know what I mean?
Guys, it's just a game.
Right. Yeah.
This is what I tell myself as I'm losing. It's just a game.
Yeah, but obviously this conversation can go much deeper, and we can get like quite emotional too when you really think about, I guess, some of the issues surrounding it, because it goes deeper than just, oh, you look like this, but why aren't you representing, this country? And they might be like half, but they might be nationally like the country they represent, like they're citizens of that country. So yeah, naturally they're going to represent that, but it's like, you don't really look like them. And, again, the example is that I'm thinking of is the tennis player Naomi Osaka, I think. Yeah. Something like that. But anyways, we're not going to get too deep. We're going to keep this lighthearted. Maybe we'll touch upon, some of the deeper issues later.
This is a very good topic. I think
it is.
Because the thing is, it can be... The thing is, it comes down to this, is those sports players... If we're going to talk about in the case of, someone who's mixed race representing one country or the other, those sports players are elevated to a position. They're literally called representatives of that country. And then that forces the light back on the country is, who do you want to be represented by? Does this individual represent you? And you look at that person and be like, they're half black. They don't represent us. We don't look like that. So then suddenly it's just this like, that person cannot be your representative, because that's what you in your mind consider as a defining feature of your country.
And now, you know what I just thought of? I thought of like those beauty pageants.
This is exactly what I didn't want to bring into it, but that's exactly what it is.
We won't get into that in this episode.
Yeah.
That could be a good episode to cover in the future. But yeah, that's all I really have to say. Like, I like repping Korea because of the reasons I mentioned, but that doesn't mean I don't like repping the U.S. If anything, it's kind of a cop out. I could represent both.
You can choose
if Korea
one
loses, like I'm like, and America wins, I'm like, yo,
so my team won. Yeah, and then when Korea wins, you'd be like, oh, my team was winning.
I'm that guy.
Yeah.
Yeah, don't stone me.
You're such a troll.
Yeah. So, anyways, hopefully you guys found that interesting. We're very curious to hear, like, for you guys that are either mixed race like us and you're between two cultures or two different like countries, or if you're just if you represent two different cultures, whether you're just a single race, like what do you do in this situation? Who do you represent?
Who do you cheer for?
And is it a serious thing in your mind? Like, do you get really like personal about it, or is it just a fun thing? We'd love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah. Thanks for watching today's video. Make sure you leave a comment below on what team that you support and what you think about the points that we made. And make sure you subscribe to this channel so you can get future videos and notifications on when we're going to release another episode. So that's it for today. Be sure to tune in next time. Thanks for watching.
See you in the next episode.
Peace.
Peace.